Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. Big weekend of racing. We had NASCAR Mobile 1 301 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, Formula 1, Talladega of F1, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix at the Baku City Circuit, explosive first lap rest of the race, bit more tame and mild, and IMSA 6 hours at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Joe Samaniego here, and with me, Kobe Lambert from Grid Tonight, Tanner Smith, editor of the Pitbox Press, and Matthew Bro from Grid Network TV. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deschelle, Mark, Robin, Matthew, and David for investing in the Grid Network. Very excited for them to be investing in us each and every month through Patreon. Link in the video description. You can also do Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat. We'll thank you on the air. And of course, if we are watching us and we're not live on the air, we'll thank you the next time we go on the air. And the simplest way to support us, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and follow us across social media at Grid Network TV. And of course, Matthew, I know he is just about done with his recap of the Mobile 1 301. So let's get started with the Mobile 1 301. And as you all just saw in the chat room, just as we went on the air, tech complete, no issues. So the results are official now. Ryan Blaney, the winner. Last year, I remember going on the air, and I felt like when NASCAR came to New Hampshire, it sort of lacked excitement leading up to the race. Just one of those races that sort of falls off everyone's radar because everyone talks about Daytona, other big races, and New Hampshire. Yeah, everyone knows that it came the Magic Mile, but that's it. Well, yesterday I said I was excited for this race being in the playoffs, and after today, I feel this race truly belongs into playoff. A race I think we'll be talking about for quite some time for many positives. Potentially, of course, the start of maybe Blaney making a second championship run. He took the lead from Josh Berry. Josh Berry using strategy. After everyone had done green flag pit stops, he stayed out because he just seemed he had a fast car, hoping that clean air will do it. But shortly after restart, Blaney got up to him, was able to get around. Blaney had to hold off Josh Berry coming in, but then it seems once Josh Berry's tires gave way, it was all Blaney leading Berry, Byron, Logano, and Elliott, your top five in the race. And I gotta say, Tanner, considering the situation Josh Berry's in, he is with the 21, the Wood brothers. They got that win early in the season. Not so great. 3 consecutive last place finishes. He would have loved to have that win. But had it been any driver besides Blaney or a Logano or any Penske driver, would we have seen Josh Berry race harder and more physical?
Oh, I absolutely believe he would have been a bit more cagey, to borrow from Dale Earnhardt's famous rattling your cage phrase. Josh Berry has been known to definitely drive a little bit over his head, especially late in races from his Xfinity Series days, and I'm sure that dates back to his late model racing as well. It is part of what attracts fans to Josh Berry, the fact that he is willing to put it all out there. Obviously came from a very humble background in the grassroots series that kind of, infiltrate NASCAR, such as the Cars Tour and just NASCAR's weekly racing series. Like I said, it's these kinds of aggressive maneuvers that endeared him to so many, coming up with Junior Motorsports and then later on with Stewart Haas and now Wood Brothers. I think that Berry, had it been anybody that was not a Penske playoff car, he probably puts the bumper to them. And frankly, you really can't blame him. I think that he had probably at least tied for the best car. I do not know for a fact if his car was actually better than Ryan Blaney's, because I never saw him pass and stay in front of Ryan Blaney outside of the initial start. And even then, Ryan Blaney caught him towards the end of the first run, passed him and Logano, and inevitably took the first stage victory. So I do think that Barry probably races harder if it's any of the other 32 cars in the field, but at the same time, that's effectively a teammate, and getting into them, as we'll talk about here in a moment, I'm sure, is not exactly the right way to go when you're not racing for a championship anymore. You want to make sure that your teammates are taken care of and inevitably make it to the following round, because it helps the entire team when one of the cars wins a championship.
Yeah, absolutely. I truly don't. It's like a yes and no for me. I think yes, he would have raced harder, but he never got to Blaney's bumper. I think he was really close with like 5 or 6 to go, and then he went up the track, and that was inevitable for the Blaney victory. I don't. Maybe the other 32 guys or 30. It would be 32 drivers out there. Maybe he would have raced a little harder. And I think if he had the car to win, Barry, I really think he would have made the move to win. But Blaney always drives everyone clean, and I think Barry knows that. And Barry's not going to get on Blaney's poop list, I guess, for lack of a better term, considering they're pretty much teammates, as close as you can get without being teammates. So, yeah, shout out to Josh Berry. I mean, anyone to finish last 3 races in a row and then have your best race since March. That's how long it's been since Barry's been even remotely close to the top 5 is March. So shout out to him. He ran a really, really good race. I think he was definitely a sleeper pick for many. I think he was one of the few guys I put on my fantasy team. Tanner beat our butts, though, this week in fantasy. So shout out to Tanner on that side. But for our Grid Network chat. But yeah, shout out really. Josh Berry had a great race. And I really don't think he would have raced too much harder. I think if it was anyone else, I don't know. Barry doesn't seem like the type of guy to bump and run even in the car store, even in the late models. But when you're in a Wood Brothers car and you are currently still 16th in points, Shane Van Gisbergen still is ahead of him in the standings right now. Sometimes you got to go for the win. But I think 50-ish points for Barry today, give or take. I believe it was 43. My bad. I forgot he didn't score last stage points. But 43 points for him is a pretty good day for him. So he'll continue on, and I guess their goal ultimately is probably not only get another win this season, which there are not many opportunities left, I feel, for that team, but it's to be ahead of Van Gisbergen in the final standings, because the lowest he could be is 16th, so I think Barry's ultimate goal is at least 15th.
I think that
too.
Oh, yeah, where?
Yeah, Austin Dillon, that's another driver she'd love to be ahead of. Just in general, I feel, especially for the Wood brothers, if they could get somehow top 10, considering the season they've had, that would be seen as like a big turnaround after the struggles from Vegas. I think you brought up a good point, Tanner. It just seems like these mistakes, and I thought early on when he got spun by Shane Van Gisbergen, I know there's a lot of discussion. Did Josh Berry come down on SVG? Did SVG go up? Was it a racing incident? And I just thought, well, there goes a good race. But he had a fast car to come back towards the front. Great move, I think, by the team to say, hey, let's try something different. Because if for some reason Blaney got held up, couldn't get around much longer, it could have been a surprise Josh Berry win. That would have been something else for the Woodrush to do that at New Hampshire. But overall, I think if I have to agree, if it was anyone else, especially if it was a Chevrolet driver, I think Josh Berry would try to get a little bit, pack some air and get them a little loose, try to get around to get that win. But what an effort by him, that team, the Wood brothers. And of course, Blaney, he now ends the Toyota winning streak, the Joe Gibbs winning streak. He is locked into the round of 8. But the big story involving Joe Gibbs Racing, they probably came in thinking everything's going great. Our 3 drivers have won consecutively in playoffs. Well, then, now there's a mess because it occurred in stage 2, about 25 or 28 laps within that second stage. Denny Hamlin spinning his teammate and grandson of Joe Gibbs, Ty Gibbs, into the wall. That ruined Ty Gibbs' day. He was running, I believe, 11th place. The frustration we saw from Denny Hamlin racing against Christopher Bell, his teammate behind Ty Gibbs. Bell nearly got caught in this mess, didn't. But afterwards, we all heard Denny Hamlin on the radio expressing his frustration, and then he asked, quote, Are they afraid to talk to him? Referring to the team talking to Ty Gibbs. Matt, was Ty Gibbs out of line racing Denny Hamlin and his teammate, especially since they're both in the playoffs?
It's like a yes and no. I feel like no, because you're still racing. So I don't think it's bad to race, but yes, how aggressive, overly aggressive I felt Ty Gibbs was racing his own teammates, especially when you're battling for 11th and there are two guys racing for a championship right behind you and you are 19th in the standings. It would have been cool if Ty would win, because that would have made the history, like we mentioned on the pre-race show. Joe Gibbs would have had 4 different drivers win in 4 races. But obviously, Ty Gibbs finished 167 laps down, so that didn't happen or remotely close to happening. But it's just one of those things where I think Denny expected him to get out of the way, and Ty Gibbs has never been that guy to be the one to get out of the way, and it showed there. And I think I'm surprised it took over 100-something races in the Ty Gibbs' career for something like this to actually occur, where his own teammate had to move him out of the way in order to get into 11th. So, yeah, I don't think Ty Gibbs was out of line for racing Hamlin, racing Bell, because at the end of the day, 19th in the standings, if you get up to 18th or 17th, that still pays more money than you would be if you were worse in the standings. But at the same time, as aggressively as they were when they were knocking doors and stuff like that, giving each other the bumper, that was a little too much. It was really unnecessary, and I'm interested to see how that shapes up. I think Ty is just definitely in a rough patch. Unfortunately for him, with all his Xfinity eligibility, I really think he needed to go down and learn a little more racecraft. And I'm still very confident the kid's going to win a bunch of races in his career. And he's only 22 years old. He'll be 23 next month. So I still think he has time, and obviously he has a seat for as long as possible. He's just got to figure out the maturity thing, and I think it's lacking. And it happens with a lot of young drivers. Sometimes it takes a while for them to figure it out, and it is taking him a while to figure it out. So I have nothing against Ty Gibbs, obviously. It's just one of those, it's a racing thing where it shouldn't happen, but it did. And that's how they have to move on to Monday. I'm interested. I think we're all interested in see how that meeting's going to go. I'm assuming they're even talking on the plane right now as we speak, live at Sunday night. But then again, we don't know what goes on behind those closed doors. Toyota meetings sometimes make headlines, sometimes they don't, right? So that's obviously referring to stuff that happened last year with other drivers and teams. But yeah, I'm interested to see what happens from here on out. Denny obviously made some interesting comments, and so did Ty. Ty had very PR answers, which obviously he's not going to want to answer certain questions. So it's better than him losing his mind and making himself look worse than just giving an answer. I'm excited for next week. So that's all we got to be, guys, at the end of the day. We got to be excited for next week. Ty said he's excited for next week in every interview. We got to be excited for next week, right?
I'm excited for next week, but that's because I'm going to the race. So if you want to see one of your favorite grid panelists on there, I'll be there. Anyhow, to move on to this Ty Gibbs problem, I think Steve Letarte captured it about a half lap before the incident actually happened, where I think had this been a race inside or for the top 5, like if Gibbs was 5th, Bell and Hamlin were 6th, 7th, it's a little bit different than racing for 12th. And, you know, again, it's like lap 110, I think at the time, 115. What are we doing? Like, it was a glaring reminder that even though Ty Gibbs can go out and absolutely throttle the field, it's somewhere like Bristol in a tire management race, even though that is something he is very much battling with most weeks in terms of tire and equipment management. It was a brutal reminder that he is still profoundly immature and just lacks any awareness of the bigger picture. I just don't think the kid sees the forest for the trees at all. Forest for the leaves, really. I mean, he can't even get to the stems and the branches onto the tree to even grasp the entire forest that's laid out ahead of him. He just lacks the composure, the maturity, and just the racecraft. I mean, Matthew touched on that, to really compete at this level of the sport. And I didn't think I'd be saying that after last year. I mean, he had a relatively solid season for somebody in their second year. I thought he was poised to do well this season, and it's just been an absolute egg, all things considered. At this point, I don't think what Ty Gibbs was doing as far as, like, you know, his combat with his teammates was, like, smart to do around lap 110 either. I mean, he drove 10 feet down the straightaway to go door slam Christopher Bell for genuinely no reason. Like, the kid just doesn't have his marbles in a row in his brain right now, and somebody really needs to sit him down. Like, you either need to go to a sports psychologist or we're going to park you. And at this point, I'd be advocating for that. He does not go out there and race with any sort of care for his competitors. And I think all of the bad things that we say about Carson Hocevar and that we place on Carson Hocevar really need to be placed on Ty Gibbs, the guy that actually does not care about his competition and races them like it.
And the thing with Ty Gibbs, too, I can't help but think of what happened back when he was in the Xfinity Series in Martinsville and how he raced his teammate Brandon Jones. He was locked in that championship for it. We could have had another Toyota in there, and he did what he did. And at the end of the day, he almost seemed to show no remorse for it. I almost feel like if Ty Gibbs is going to be that kind of person, you got to expect the same thing from your team. And at the end of the day, you're not helping your team out by doing this. This is not going to be a fun day for Joe Gibbs at the end. Granted, the winning streak's lost, and in motorsports, you're bound to see a winning streak snap at some point. To have this kind of attention from everyone in NASCAR, especially on Ty Gibbs, and I think for Ty Gibbs, after last year, when in the playoffs it looked like he had a shot at winning Atlanta, I thought he is coming close to his first win. Yes, there was a crew chief change. Yes, there was, the start of the season was really rough. He has the speed, but it just seems like he still needs a lot of room for improvement. Just not racing for the best interest of his team, more himself, which we've seen drivers like even Austin Dillon trying everything he can to get Kyle Busch into the playoffs. Valiant effort, but just was not going to be happening.
Austin Dillon racing really hard to stay on the lead lap today.
Really hard to stay on the lead lap today. I gotta ask, Tanner, when it comes to Ty Gibbs, and especially the comment from Denny Hamlin, are they afraid to talk to him? Do you have a sense there's a perception of nepotism? And is that hurting Ty Gibbs' credibility as a Cup Series driver?
I think if you go back to the week that he wiped out Brandon Jones in that Xfinity race and the ensuing championship celebration that Ty Gibbs was, fortunate enough to get, there was a loud chorus of grandpa's money that ran rampant through the stands at Phoenix Raceway that evening. I do think that given what ended up happening and the tragedy that ensued that evening, a lot of that got quiet, like very quiet, because I think a lot of people, had a lot of empathy for Ty Gibbs and what he went through with his father's sudden passing the night of his championship. That, and, you go back to Ty's first couple of years, he didn't really have a whole lot of these major outbursts that you would, see from him in the Xfinity series in his one full-time year there, where, he was getting into a fight with teammates, getting into a fight with his helmet on pit road, constantly talking smack, all this stuff. Haven't seen the same Ty Gibbs of old in the NASCAR Cup Series, which, for those first 2 years was a nice, refreshing, way to get to know him again. I think that a lot of people were, obviously warded off by him comparing himself to Jesus Christ and things like that. So it was definitely nice to see him be a bit more humble, be a bit more of a respectable racer. And I mean, this year has completely thrown that out the window. I mean, you're talking about game on with your teammate, man. Your longest tenured guy that has won the most races at Joe Gibbs Racing teammate. You are beefing with that guy. I just don't really see what the team that you technically partially own and are the heir of stands to gain from you having beef with one of your teammates. Not only that, just in general, I think that, pointing this towards nepotism, that's kind of a tricky term in NASCAR circles because most drivers, one way or the other, are probably a byproduct of it if you really look into it a little too deep, whether it be, their father or mother own a company that, helped them fund their racing career, or in the case of someone like Ryan Blaney, your father was a racer in the Cup Series and things like that. But you look at guys like Ty Gibbs and Austin Dillon, and you're just like, man, did we hype them up too much because their, family was able to put up more money in the lower series to completely put them head and shoulders above the competition to where it wasn't really that much of a threat. And now that they're actually racing on Sundays with the big boys, they look like Davids less than Goliaths like they did. You've really got to start asking those kinds of questions. I do think that Ty has, a long career ahead of him more than likely, assuming he intends to keep driving. But I'll be honest, Joe, these first 3 seasons, I expected more, and I feel like we've gotten hardly anything out of Ty Gibbs to this point, and you start to wonder when that first win is going to actually come, especially inching in towards the 2026 season.
For me, I still think it's a when, not an if. I know this kid is going to win a race, but he's definitely has to figure stuff out. And earlier comment, I think we need to treat Hosvar and Gibbs the same way in terms of how they're acting out a lot. I don't know if it's a product of being in the Cup Series as a 20, 21-year-old kid, but at the same time, it shows there's a different set of the development process, I feel like. And a lot of guys who skip one of the major series and go right in the Cup, whether it's Truck to Cup or ARCA to Xfinity to Cup, it seems like something's missing a lot of the time, and a lot of that's maturity. So I feel like a guy like Corey Haim's been in the Truck Series, it feels like 27 years at this point. I think he'll be fine when he comes to the Cup level in terms of maturity. But I'd argue that sense of nepotism is really a silly excuse, in my opinion, to trash drivers when people say, oh, he's a Nepo baby. When you think about it, guys like Cole Custer is a champion in a lower series. Austin Dillon's a multiple-time champion in a lower series. Austin Cindric, a champion in lower series. Ty Gibbs, champion in a lower series. Ty Dillon, almost champion in lower series. So it kind of shows that a lot of the nepotism babies in this sport do have talent. I would still say Cody Ware has talent. I just don't think it's Cup-level talent. But I think he definitely can race competitively. Just I wouldn't say it's in the top 3 series. No offense to him. But I don't think it really hurts him. I think it might. I would argue, though, against myself now, as I would say it does probably mess with him a little bit, knowing that damn, I always tell you guys, I think we could find a compilation of clips. Ty Gibbs, it's like there's a dam in front of him, and he's just got to break through that dam. And once he does, I'm pretty sure he will start clicking off wins and stuff. I feel like it took Martin Truex a really long time. A lot of his success in the Xfinity, but took him a while to get it going in Cup, and then once he did, he really took off. I think Ty Gibbs can have a similar path like that. It's just he's got to get through it. And at 22 years old, about to be 23, he's got a lot to really figure out. I don't know if they need to sit down with him like Tanner had mentioned. I don't know what you do with him. I think if he acts out again, maybe you should put a reserve driver in that Monster Energy car. I don't know who it would be at this point. Are they going to put Almirola in a car for a race? I know they're probably not going to put Corey Haim, but I think that would really mess with Ty Gibbs if they put Corey Haim in the 54 car for a race. But just kind of show we don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't think Joe Gibbs Racing knows how to deal with it at this point. So it's just what I guess, like I told you guys before, they have to eat the elephant with this kid. And I think how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. And I think you really got to take it step by step with Ty, figure out what is the source of what's going on, figure it out. Because I still believe he's got a lot of talent. He's still top 20 in points. He's actually still ahead of Kyle Busch in the standings. Granted, I think if you put Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs equipment versus the RCR stuff that he's been running for the last 3 seasons, maybe there'd be definitely a different story there. But just for him, it's just, I don't think the nepotism is really the best terminology. It's just one of those things I think people use as an excuse to put people down, because most of motorsports, you have to have money. Your mother or father most likely needs to have a business, or they have to do business to business deals with a business that has a lot of money. Like William Byron's father, I believe, did a lot of business with Liberty University, hence why that kid got a lot of money, and obviously has a lot of talent anyway. But she's just one example of the many reasons why certain Cup drivers are in certain seats, the 36 of them. So, yeah, Ty Gibbs, they got to figure it out. I'm still very confident. I think I am the most confident of anyone at Grid Network in Ty Gibbs to get a win and really kick it off. It just, it hurts every time you talk about it, because I feel like every time I say that, something else happens where it's like pushing it back a little bit. And it's just like, I'm still confident, but it's harder to be confident every time something like this happens. But I think he'll figure it out. He's still young, but then again, I don't know anything. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, y'all bring up a great point. There is a sense of, you need to have connections in motorsports to make it happen, whether it's, a business that just really puts their faith in you to put in the millions of dollars, or through a family connection that knows somebody or directly related. It was interesting when I heard Denny Hamlin's comment. I was just happened to think of, like, sometimes some organizations you might have, a family member of somebody high up there. And sometimes it's a little bit intimidating to be that employee, to be like, hey, I got to sit down the owners or the head person's son, who is a grown-up, who has a talent, and rein them in. It sometimes is a bit scary situation. That was the first thing that popped in my mind when Hamlin said what he said. Does he have the talent? I say he does. I mean, he was able to get wins when he raced. He was so close to getting a win last year. I do think he can get that win. He has the equipment. I think now him and that crew chief are working together better, where they're having the solid races. It's just, you got to see the big picture. And I think also, too, that will help him build confidence within the team, earn that respect with Denny Hamlin, Christopher Bell, and so on. But it is something else to see what all happens.
Indeed. Joe, if you don't mind, I'll tack something on here. I think that the reason Ty Gibbs probably faces more nepotism, criticism from everybody else, has more to do with the fact that, we've been talking over the last 2 years, really 3 years, about Alex Bowman's status with Hendrick Motorsports, a driver that doesn't really have like a racing lineage to point to. His grandfather doesn't own a Cup team, things like that. And again, we're talking about an 8-time Cup winner. We're talking about a guy that made the playoffs both of the last 2 years, and probably would have had he not broken his back in a sprint car accident in 2023. I mean, I just feel that, we're talking about guys that underperform in good equipment, and Ty Gibbs is probably the most glaring example. I mean, for most of the year, he was outside of the top 20 in points, while all 3 of his teammates were collecting checkered flags and trophies. And it's not getting any better. I mean, Chase Briscoe came into a team that did not win last year at all and has won 2 races with that team, and one of them was in dominating fashion at the Southern 500. So with all that said, you've got to look at someone like Gibbs, and I mean, personally, if I felt that I could get a 4th driver in that car that was better than him, I know it's your grandson, but maybe you've got to at least take a quick peek at that to keep him honest. I mean, the kid drives like he takes everything for granted. And honestly, that's really not someone you want behind the wheel representing your organization, even if it's one that he might own someday.
Yeah, if I can add to that too, Joe, it's I think one of those things too. I'm gonna be this guy. Please hear me out. I think a lot of the reason why people crap on Ty Gibbs is because of how prominent his grandfather is, and I think a lot of it too might be with Toyota too. And the fact I know that sounds silly, but nobody's talking about Cole Custer running 34th when his dad was the president of Haas. A lot of people would be like, "Who the hell is Joe Custer?" But everyone knows who Joe Gibbs is, whether you're a Washington football fan or whether you're a NASCAR fan. So I think that could be a big reason too. But then again, it's Ty Gibbs, like you said, Tanner said, it seems like the mindset's there. I think he's got the talent. So there's three sets of drivers, right? There's drivers with all the talent but no mindset. There's drivers with the mindset but not as much talent. And then there's both. Ty Gibbs falls in that where he's got all the talent, just the mindset isn't there yet. And then there are some drivers, I'm not going to mention names, who think they have the talent. They have the mindset for it, but they just aren't as up to par as the other guys. So for him, yeah, like Tanner said too, it's going to require probably a sit down and just I think they're going to have to go from there. But Toyota does have a lot of talent. I'm not going to say many of them are more talented in the lower levels than Ty Gibbs, because I think Ty Gibbs is probably the best Toyota development driver in terms of success in Xfinity that's come out in a very long time. I don't think you can argue who else won more Xfinity races with Toyota besides Ty Gibbs, besides Kyle Busch, obviously, who was already a veteran. So I don't know. Corey Haim's got a lot of talent. I know there's rumors certain guys who were with Toyota and ARCA that are now with Chevrolet that might go back to Toyota, but we'll see. Also, Christopher Bell did win a lot. I forgot about him. And Eric Jones, I think, won a lot too in Xfinity. But
Daniel Suarez, etc. Yeah,
he's a champion too. So yeah, maybe one of them. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I just want to add that on. Thank you.
The other thing too, I always felt with Joe Gibbs racing, especially before, there was this thing where it just seemed like some drivers would go there and thrive, like a Tony Stewart, Bobby Labonte, Kyle Busch. And then some drivers would go there and something was missing and it wasn't working out. Joey Logano, just one win under rainy conditions. You had JJ Yaley, didn't set the world on fire in the 18 car. Daniel Suarez.
That in the 11.
Jason Leffler in the 11. I mean, and of course his replacement, Denny Hamlin. So I mean, I've always felt like it is an intense environment there. It is just something definitely I think might change, especially if they really have a discussion, because at the end of the day, I think we do see in various forms of motorsports. I mean, Formula One, people will give grief that Lance Stroll is still at Aston Martin because of his connections. I would say there's even people that will still say Austin Dillon because of his connection with Richard Childress. I would say Austin Dillon, give him a good car, he showed what he could do. Richmond, he gets the big picture trying to help Kyle Busch get the win. Ty Gibbs just needs to get to that level. And I think when that occurs, that's when you'll hear less of the talk about who your grandfather is, where the money's coming from, and more about look what he could do, especially if he could race much smarter out there on the track. I will say this race, there were some drivers I know we'll talk a little bit about where I was just thinking, what was that driver thinking? That wasn't smart. Ryan Blaney, though, smart race, get this win. No worries for Kansas next race weekend or the Charlotte Roval. So he could really, just focus on just trying to get those wins. And then the round of 8, looking good for him. Las Vegas, some top 5s there, missing that win. But Talladega has got to multiple wins in Talladega. Martinsville, we all remember how he went out there, got a big win.
2 years in a row.
So, Matt, do you see Blaney in the championship 4?
150,000%. Yeah.
Ooh.
I'm more confident in Ryan Blaney making the championship 4 of any of my championship 4 picks that I had. I think a lot of people crap on Logano specifically for the way the playoffs are set up and how it benefits him. But I'd argue Ryan Blaney is one of the best race car drivers in the world. And I think he shows that every week. He can win almost everywhere. And it's funny, the playoffs seem to be set up more in favor. They're not obviously set up for him, but it seems like it plays to Ryan Blaney's strengths better than anyone else. Because and when you look at Las Vegas, Talladega, and Martinsville, who else can realistically win at every one of those tracks and you be confident? I mean, you could say William Byron in the past has won at, I believe, all 3 of them. You could say Denny Hamlin as well, but other than that, it's got to be Ryan Blaney. And then Joey Logano, that's a whole other story. He just be winning randomly. But yeah, so Ryan Blaney, if you didn't put him in the championship 4, I would truly question why you didn't. Because I feel like when you look at your bracket, there was no doubt in my mind that Ryan Blaney was going to make at least the round of 8, and obviously he did. And I was 85% sure that he was going to be in the championship 4. So yeah, I'm very confident in Ryan Blaney. There's two other guys I'm very confident that can as well. But honestly, Ryan Blaney, I'm the most confident in. I didn't pick him to win the championship, though. But I think he's probably going to finish. He probably will win it, honestly. He's got it. He's got that it factor.
In the greatest driver in the world discussion, I don't think Ryan Blaney necessarily deserves to be in that discussion, but there are certain times where I feel that he is a bit more of a well-rounded and considerate driver than some of the other ones that happen to occupy that discussion. That said, it's Alex Palou again and again and again. With all that said, I think that Ryan Blaney has been in my championship 4 since last Phoenix. I did on the Gay Racing podcast in my appearance there prior to the year. I did pick him to be my champion this year, and the only reason I've really wavered from that at all is because I think Denny Hamlin would be a better story, personally. With that said, though, I think that the title runs through Team Penske and probably more specifically the 12 team. They have finished second in that race at Phoenix 3 straight years, every race in the next gen era at Phoenix in the fall. The guy is unparalleled in the next gen era at Phoenix. He just does not have the win yet to really cap that off. But I think that there is not a single driver in the field this year that has shown speed at practically every facility we visited, quite like Ryan Blaney and the 12 team. They have been strong everywhere we go. Road courses where he set the pole at Watkins Glen, New Hampshire, Las Vegas, Homestead, Phoenix. The guy has flashed pace practically everywhere. And I think that should strike fear in every one of the remaining 11 drivers racing for this championship. Because who's to say Ryan Blaney doesn't go out and win another race this round? If you remember correctly, the Kansas Spring race was probably one more lap away from going Ryan Blaney's way because Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell ran out of tire. In addition to that, he was the inaugural winner of the Roval and has put on very exceptional efforts there in the recent past. So, I mean, who's to say he doesn't start racking up playoff points these next 2 weeks to try to propel him via points into the championship 4 instead of, obviously going 3 for 3 at Martinsville the past few years or winning at Talladega in dazzling fashion as he is known to do. I believe he has 3 wins there with less than a foot between each of those wins to the next car. Ryan Blaney is easily a top 3 driver in this sport, and because he races clean and doesn't do it in the same way that everybody else does, he doesn't get anywhere near the credit he deserves. But believe you me, Ryan Blaney, not only a championship 4 virtual lock at this point, but probably the favorite to win the NASCAR Cup Series championship and hoist the Bill France Cup at the start of November.
Blaney is really looking good. Everything you said about him, I have to be honest. I gotta say, yes, I see him in the championship floor. I think he could get it done in Las Vegas. I think if that team has everything going good, he could get it done. And if you win in Vegas, you don't have to worry about Talladega. You don't have to worry about Martinsville. They could just focus on everything for Phoenix. And the Penske teams, they seem to have Phoenix on the lock right now. Of course, it's going to be interesting in Kansas. We know that race could produce a lot of cautions. We saw plenty of cautions at New Hampshire. 8 total. 3 cars were out of the race. Ty Gibbs, John Hunter Nemechek, hard hit with that sidewall. It was like just tire hopping when he was trying to brake. And then Dan Suarez get a little bit airborne in that big one, which Brad Keselowski essentially caused that big one. He took out Dan Suarez, who's just, I think, looking forward to getting the season over with. Ruined Shane Van Gisbergen's strong run, scored his first non-super speedway oval points today, was in the top 10 all day until this occurred. And it just appears that move was not going to work. Brad Keselowski way on the inside, pretty much on the apron. Here comes that wall, moves up, collects SVG, multiple others, nowhere to go. Any explanation on what Brad Keselowski was trying to do or hope would happen?
I mean, I think obviously the objective was to pass all those cars.
Well, yeah.
But I just feel like when you're on the apron and you duck below another car that is also on the apron and you know that that inside wall is going to be coming up eventually, you should not immediately assume, hey, if I duck beneath this guy, he's going to give me the room necessary for me to make this pass. I'll be honest, it was a robust move, and he ended up busting his butt, and multiple other drivers in the process. Brad Keselowski did. Yeah, it was, as Ryan Blaney would put it, a very low percentage move, which I believe spawned from this New Hampshire race last year when McDowell sent it in on Ryan Blaney going into turn 1 in the rain and completely wiped both of them out late in the event. With all that said, I just feel like someone of Brad Keselowski's caliber shouldn't be making mistakes like that. It was frankly the dumbest move that I saw all weekend, and that's really saying something because the truck race was full of rather ill-timed, ill-executed moves, such as Ben Rhodes' 3-wide wreck with Crafton and Breidinger in the truck race. So with all that said, I think Brad Keselowski was trying to make some ground up, but man, some common sense there would have really gone a long way into him actually completing this race and not having a wrecked race car.
Hey, in the wise words of Art and Senna, if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver, right, Brad? Because that was not a gap that existed, but he went for it. I think a lot of it, too, had to deal with, it was either Bowman or Bell they forced everyone kind of down. It was like 5 wide. But Brad Keselowski, who is one of the highest IQ drivers in the field, I would argue, there's a reason why he's won over 30 races on a championship and is an owner. I don't know why he did that. And I don't think he knows why he did that. I bet you if he could go back, he wouldn't do it. He did end up screwing SVG. And I feel bad for Daniel Suarez. I know we talked Josh Berry had 3 finishes of 35th or worse. If you look, Suarez has finished 36th at New Hampshire, 37th at Bristol, and 35th at Gateway. That's really bad, too. I'm going to have to add that to my story. So keep in mind, gridnetworktv.com. I got to add that part to it. But, yeah, you got to feel for Suarez. Just another brutal day for him. Just, I know he's leaving Trackhouse. Nothing's official. I haven't heard any rumors. I don't think any of us have where he's going. I think all of us can guess where he's going in either Cup or Xfinity. But no, it's a very terrible ending for Suarez and Trackhouse. The excitement that we saw when Pitbull co-owned the team, and then Justin Marks, him getting multiple wins with this organization, and then just completely falling on his face. When the team's not confident in Suarez, Suarez isn't confident in himself. That's pretty much if you summarize his entire Cup career, that's really it. And when they are confident in him, he's up there and he's winning. Now he's 29th, barely ahead of 30th in points. So feel bad for him. But yeah, with Brad Keselowski, not to turn it back to the actual question, no idea what he was doing. No idea what he hoped. I guess he hoped that he was going to, slide job 12 cars and take the lead. Guess he saw those NASCAR 25 clips of the guys playing on lower AI and said, I'm going to do that and move around everyone. And it did not work. And yeah, that's what happened, I guess. I can't really make a Boston Red Sox joke about that because that was the scheme. I wouldn't argue anything against that, but yeah, no idea, Joe. I don't know if you have a similar thought of Tanner and I, or if you actually know what he was trying to do there.
He tried to bang his trash can into a title there, and it just didn't end up happening that way.
I'm still mad about that, Houston. I'm a Dodger fan, so yeah, that hurt. You kind of hit me to my core there, Tanner.
I have no idea what Keselowski was doing, and I get it. You got to be aggressive, but it's like, what's the spotter not telling? You're in the bottom 5 wide. Come on, this is just not going to work. Shane Van Gisbert's not going to let off. He's quite a ways ahead. It was just not a smart move, and I get it. He's winless, frustrated after nearly getting a win at Bristol. And I had thought, well, maybe he could have a top 10 day. Then he does this, and it's like, okay, that team still got a way to go. And just, yeah, RFK Racing, that team from last year where we thought maybe they'll be contenders, just doesn't seem to be having their things going right this year. And of course, I feel like Ryan Preece has had one of the better years out of the 3 drivers there, and just missed the playoffs, of course. But the playoff picture, taking a look at it, Chastain, Cindric, 12 and 19 points below the cut line. Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, 23-11, 23 and 27 below the cut line. I gotta say, Matthew, Kansas, we know that's a good track for 23-11. Bubba Wallace has one there. A 45 car has one there. But when they're coming in this many points below, and then the next race afterwards is the Charlotte Roval, is 23-11 in a must-win situation next week at Kansas?
I would say must top 2 in stage point. I don't know if must win, because you'd be surprised how well Bubba and Tyler Reddick do at the Roval. It's actually, for Bubba Wallace as a driver who's not known for his road course stuff, he actually does really decent there. And then Tyler Reddick's just one of the best road course racers in general, I feel. But yeah, I don't know what the hell they did today. That was a stinker in a nice way. I mean, Reddick was like 21st. I think Riley Herbst was 24th, 25th, and then Bubba was 26th. There was like nothing at all for them. There was absolutely, I don't know what they could have done to be better, and I feel like it would have been anything. It just seems like the entire time those two are on the radio complaining about something, as not Riley Herbst obviously, but the 2 playoff guys, and for them to be, well, Reddick was below the cut line, but Bubba was ahead of the cut line, to leave with no stage points and just absolutely horrific day. 23-11 is a team that when they get hot, they get really hot, and we've seen it multiple times. Obviously, Bubba Wallace had that stretch of multiple top 5s. Tyler Reddick can show he can win and then win a lot when he does. He just hasn't this year. Obviously, he's the only playoff guy without a win now. But then sometimes they have these types of days, and it, unfortunately for them, happens at the most very inconvenient times for them, especially to start a playoff round, just to be like that. I mean, even last week at Bristol, Bubba was running well, and then obviously his incident took him out of the race. But Tyler Reddick really didn't do much of anything. And then, but then you go back to Darlington and Reddick almost won it all. And so it's like they're very, very inconsistent, and that is going to kill them. I think if you look at Grid TV on social media, we all had our playoff predictions. I think we're the three of us. I don't know if either of us had Wallace or Reddick being eliminated this round, and it's not looking like we're going to be correct about that. I think we both have. I think a lot of us had Chastain and Cindric, so I think we're kind of good in that sense. But yeah, I don't know what 2311 was doing. I think they're in a must score a lot of points, and it could be one of those situations where maybe you don't win, but if you do get top 5 in both stages and finish 5th or 6th, and you earn more points than the winner, something like that. We see that happen a lot in the sport. I don't know if it was Joey Logano today had like the second most points of the race and he finished 4th. And it's happened before where drivers have finished 7th or 8th, but because they won the stages, they got more points. So they have to play it smart. And it's very, very peculiar to see a team like that get so hot and absolutely cook their way into the round of 12 and then completely not even turn the button on to start this round. So we could be talking about a Bubba Wallace or Tyler Reddick victory at Kansas. Very likely, honestly, that's really their track, it seems like. It hasn't been recently, but it has been in the next-gen era. So, yeah, it was just an absolute stinker for that team. It happens to everyone. You could argue, compare them a lot to Trackhouse. Trackhouse, more often than not, puts up events like that, but then they have a random Ross Chastain legacy race and where he dominates and wins or Shane Vick wins. So, yeah, for me, you got to do well these next 2 weeks because, unfortunately for them, pretty sure every other playoff driver besides maybe Austin Cindric was like a top 12 driver today. I think Cindric was like 17th. Reddick obviously outside the top 20. Bubba's up. Even Chase Elliott was 27th, went up to 5th or something like that. So they're top 10 at least. So it's like, yeah, you guys got to do that. What you saw happen with those other teams that might have not had that same momentum. Now they have it and you don't. So I guess for a basketball reference, the ball is in your court and you have to score with it. And today it's like they held it until the buzzer went off and they got a shot clock violation. So they got to just regroup for next week. I'm confident they can. So I guess we'll see there.
2311 has certainly had an exceptional record to this point at Kansas Speedway, but unfortunately that hasn't been necessarily great of recent. Since the introduction of the Camry XSE that the Toyotas currently run, they just haven't, regained the form that they had prior to that in the first 2 years of the next-gen era where they won 3 of the 4 events held at the facility. With that said, I do think that there is more than enough brain power and determination over at 2311 Racing to get them over the hump at that facility and compete next week. But man, today was a real punch to the gut for that team, especially with the round 1 that they had. I think that I expected Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick to both have a lot better of a day, and for some reason it just didn't happen. I think that in particular, Bubba has had significantly strong runs here in the past, but those were both in the XSE, the pre-XSE era of 23 and 22. In the next-gen era, where I believe he finished 8th and then 3rd. But you've definitely got to look at today as a missed opportunity if you're 2311. That said, they're definitely not in a must-win just yet, but I think you have to go into next week thinking we're going to get stage points, we are going to finish in the top 10, and we'll have to just let the cards fall where they may. If you go into next week thinking you have to win, that's usually when mistakes tend to happen. So if I were 2311, I would resolve to making sure that both of your cars are within 15 points of the cut line. I think that's about the range that you need to be at to go into the Roval and have a decent shot of actually catapulting yourself into the final round, or well, not the final round, but the semifinal round, the round of 8. But that said, today was certainly not a banner day for Toyota as a whole, so I almost wonder if this had more to do with the manufacturer than it did the race team today. All things considered, though, it's certainly a big swing and a miss for that team today. Bubba Wallace, on the mini onboards that they had of him today, that car just never sounded like it was, being tamed in any way, which I don't think is Bubba's fault. I think they just kind of missed the setup. But all that said, Kansas is certainly not a must-win for them, but it is certainly a place that they can win, so they should try to win.
Kansas, next race weekend, could be a big weekend for Bubba Wallace. That 23 team, that would be something else that they could get to that next round. Of course, Tyler Reddick still looking for his first win. He'd love to get that done too. And of course, just make more discussion, at least for the fan side of 2311, NASCAR. They're still advancing in the playoffs. That seems to not get old. And of course, we'll be following everything with 2311, all the Cup Series teams, Kansas preview next race weekend, and of course, throughout the week, all the news on Grid Tonight. Before we switch to F1, we're going to let you go, Matthew, but what was your shining moment from the race weekend?
Yeah, I guess for 2311, they hope there's a big charter case milestone coming up in the next couple of days so they can go out and win the next week. One shining moment, besides the obvious in NASCAR with Penske and Blaney, I would say Max Verstappen, actually keeping the hopes alive for, I guess, the people who don't want McLaren to run away with the title like they are going to. I think he's keeping it interesting in a car that's probably the fourth or fifth best on the grid. I think their upgrades are clearly in his favor, and he's won both of the last races by like 12 seconds or more. So, yeah, 6th Grand Slam in his career for Max Verstappen. So I think that's a big one shot. I think that's my one shining moment. And then obviously you guys are going to touch on IMSA and I think Cadillac as well, which I know you guys will handle that part of it. I think that's a big moment. Yeah, so my one main shining moment, besides the obvious with Blaney, I would say is Max Verstappen. So hopefully that's a good segue into the next segment here on Grid Network. So thank you guys once again for having me, and make sure you check out gridnetworktv.com for my NASCAR recap story that I got to add some stuff to after talking. I realized I'm missing a couple things. So thank you guys again.
Thank you, Matthew. And we encourage everyone, gridnetworktv.com, Grid Network TV across social media, and that article will be up on our website. Thank you so much, Matthew. Of course, talk about Max Verstappen. Kobe, let's jump into it. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix.
Yeah, and we like to call the Azerbaijan Grand Prix the Talladega of the Formula One schedule because of how unpredictable it can be with all them fast straights and twists and turns, and sometimes you see big crashes into the barriers. And we have 7 race weekends to go, and if Formula One had a playoff format, Oscar Piastri might be in some big trouble. On lap 1, he jumped the start, was in last place, then he crashed into the wall and was the only driver to DNF from the race, and he also crashed out in qualifying as well on Saturday. Lando Norris's pit crew had another slow stop. We remember what happened in the last race. He finished 7th. Max Verstappen took victory in Baku from pole position. Verstappen leads Baku 69 points behind Piastri in the championship. If Verstappen outscores Piastri by 9 points in each race, he would retake the lead, and that's not counting the sprint races. The winner of a Grand Prix earns 10 more points than third place each race, and for the first time since the 2020 Russian Grand Prix, the 2 Red Bulls and the 2 Racing Bulls, they were AlphaTauri back then, scored points in the same race. Joe, is Max Verstappen truly back in the championship hunt? And are you surprised to see Oscar Piastri fall flat on his face this weekend?
Oscar Piastri, I was surprised. I felt like for the first time we saw where it seemed like the pressure got to him. The mistakes. This isn't his very first time at this track. It just seems like we know there was conditions where you had gusty winds in qualifying that got a lot of people off guard. He made that mistake. But then to jump the start, that was a big mistake where it was just like, what are you doing? And I truly believe once he made that mistake, he just put himself under too much pressure, tried to make that move, end up in the wall. Day is done on lap 1. That was a big moment, I think, for a lot of people to show that, okay, a lot of people have talked about Oscar Piastri sort of like another Kimi Räikkönen, just so calm, ice cold, cool, calm, collective. Not this weekend. Now you know there's some cracks there. You got to put him under pressure. You want to contend for the championship. Max Verstappen, what better person than to put somebody under a lot of pressure? It truly seems like Max Verstappen is back in the hunt. 2 consecutive wins. With those 2 wins, he has really started to close the gap on Oscar Piastri. That first race where he won, he was just so calm, looked like he was having a good time. Again, calm, cool. He just seems like the Max Verstappen we saw in 2023. And if that's the case, he's truly at that level where everybody's going to be in trouble, because I think that Red Bull team is starting to come on strong. Max Verstappen is looking really good right now, Kobe. This could be a sign of a pretty thrilling, maybe closing battle for the championship in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's really crazy because throughout the season we've been looking at the battle between Piastri and Norris, the McLaren teammates. We said it'd be a 2-horse race, but if Max Verstappen keeps his form up late into the season, it might just be a 3-horse race, especially if Max can score max points, and then you have Piastri and Norris, scoring minimum points or not finishing in the points at all. That'll cut down that gap pretty quickly. And with those, with a few sprint races to close out the season, with those additional points on the line, it could make things extremely interesting. And I know in a second we'll talk more about what's happened at Red Bull, from the first half of the season and now entering the second half of the season. But it's been really crazy seeing Max these last few races, how he's completely turning it on, while McLaren, who knows what's going on over there, because they've had the car that's been the class of the field this year over Red Bull, but Max Verstappen, when you think he's out, he always seems to pull a rabbit out of his hat, just like he did today in Baku. And the qualifying was extremely disappointing for both McLaren drivers, but Max capitalized on that. And it just seems like since the incident in the last race weekend with the papaya rules, that's just really taken some of the energy out of McLaren. And I don't think they're in a good place right now leaving Baku. And Oscar Piastri, and this was really the first race weekend where I could see that he's vulnerable to the mental side of racing, because qualifying, end up crashing out of there. Really surprised to see that. And then you don't see him make mistakes like jumping the start, and then like you were saying, Joe, I think today was just way too much pressure on him. The crash in qualifying, the jump start, just trying too hard, and then you end up smashing yourself into the wall like this and completely ruining your day. And we've been talking about Piastri versus Norris all season. We said that Oscar was the one who was, the stronger driver than Norris. But now we see Lando have his crack start to show. And as you said, now Oscar's cracks have started to show as well. And hopefully this will just be a mulligan for Oscar's case. And heading into the next round in Singapore, maybe we'll see him get back on his high horse, and be seemingly unbothered by what's going on. But right now, it seemed like he really cracked under pressure this weekend. As I said, he fell flat on his face, and this is something that he needs to avoid if he wants to win this year's World Championship. And switching back to Red Bull, since Lauren Mekies took over for Christian Horner as the Red Bull team principal, we've noticed a trend developing. Verstappen has gone from issues, the first half of the season over the summer since the Austria retirement, to scoring 3 straight podiums, and 2 of those being race wins. Yuki Tsunoda has 2 points finishes in the last 3 races, and considering the awful year he's had in that second seat, that's a good thing for Yuki that he was able to maintain his qualifying position and not lose any ground today in Baku. Racing Bulls had a podium with Isaac Hadjar Zandvoort, and Liam Lawson qualified third, for the race at Baku, and both drivers have been finishing inside of the points more often than not. Joe, does it look like changing team principals mid-season was the right move for both of these Red Bull programs?
It seems like this was the right move that needed to occur for the programs. I mean, coming over from essentially the Racing Bulls team to Red Bull, that is a promotion. That is something where the team is saying, we're showing our confidence in you to lead us to the next step. And that next step, I mean, we're talking about you replace Christian Horner, who many have seen as very instrumental in the success of Red Bull, being there for all the drivers' championships up until this year. But the results we're starting to see, Yuki Tsunoda, what a day he had. Good qualifying effort, no mistakes by the pits, got up there. Liam Lawson, at the beginning of the season, he was just looking so rough, goes to Racing Bulls. Now he just seems to have that confidence being rebuilt, especially after qualifying, a strong effort. And I know this wasn't the best day for Isaac Hajar, a 10th place finish, but this is a very challenging track. Considering what he's done this year already, I think he has to go out there with the overall good attitude that we finish in the points. Finishing the points means you're doing something the other 10 drivers behind you are not doing, and that's collecting points. So overall, it seems like this switch may have done something to where maybe there's a renewed sense of hope. Maybe there's a new drive in everybody, just a new tone in the management from the team principal down, working together. I mean, we saw how Racing Bulls have been getting better and better, and this year Racing Bulls are pretty good. Can't help but think that kind of motivation, that kind of vision is coming now to Red Bull, Kobe, and I feel like this could really show to be maybe if Max Verstappen does come up short in the Drivers' Championship. This could be the Red Bull in 2026 that will be bringing the fight to McLaren and their drivers.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. And it's really crazy. So, their turnaround in the last few races, since Laurent Mekies came in as team principal, I was saying, at first we talked about this. We're saying, not really sure, if the change in Christian Horner has meant anything, but I guess maybe from a team morale and energy standpoint, maybe, the change was good because we've seen, in like other sports and all that, like football, basketball, baseball, you have your head coach or your manager out there, leading your organization. And when you've had somebody at the same place for too long, the message gets kind of stale, in the same styles anymore, may not work anymore. So, and, Christian Horner's been at Red Bull, he was at Red Bull for an extremely long time, decades. And for them to move on from him after all this time, obviously things were going to be different, but maybe, the way Christian was running the organization, it got to a point where it just wasn't working anymore. So bring someone fresh on like Laurent Mekies. It has done a lot of good for Red Bull. Maybe some of the key issues that Christian didn't identify as team principal for, maybe Lauren come in and completely change that. And if so, the results are absolutely showing, and maybe they did the right thing to get rid of Horner, and all the baggage that he was carrying from his scandal that happened last year and that's continued, to drag on. And also his rivalry with Max's dad, Oscar Verstappen, wasn't helpful either. So now that distraction is out the door. Max is committed to Red Bull for the foreseeable future, and now they can just continue to work on, getting, Max potentially having an outside shot at winning this drivers' championship, and getting Yuki Tsunoda up to speed, which, really good for him to finish inside the points today, right outside the top 5. And considering the year he's had, that's a really good result for him. Has to feel like a win to at least maintain your track position. And then the Racing Bull drivers, Liam Lawson, he lost at the beginning of the season when he went to Red Bull. They dropped him quickly, and then he went back to Racing Bulls. Took him a little bit to rediscover his confidence. Now Liam Lawson is driving like a driver we all expected him to be. And Isaac Hajar, completely done a solid job, leading the team this year, and he's put himself in the conversation to potentially be Max Verstappen's teammate in 2026. So, excuse me. I think if you're Red Bull, you have to be extremely excited about what's to come closing out this season, because the momentum seems to have shifted from McLaren to them. And now looking back at Oscar Piastri again, he's looked unbeatable for much of the season, but Baku seems to have taken a huge bite out of him, 25 points ahead of his teammate Lando Norris and 69 points ahead of Verstappen. McLaren, as I mentioned, coming to scrutiny for his papaya rules, and Verstappen is looking strong and carries momentum into the Singapore Grand Prix, which will take place in a few weeks on October 5th. Joe, if McLaren fails to get Oscar Orlando the Drivers' Championship, would you consider this the biggest collapse in the history of motorsports of any discipline? Because it seemed like, it's right for the taking, but if they somehow blow this to Max Verstappen, who is still, few races back points-wise, like, would you think this would be the epic collapse?
Without a doubt, I know behind the scenes, we were talking about, you brought it up, like, would this be the biggest collapse? And I feel when you look at how the races have gone from Oscar Piastri getting all the wins. I mean, he won in China, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Miami, 3 in a row. He had countless podiums, particularly third place finishes, won at Spain, more podiums. I mean, Canada It's the one race he didn't have a podium between the Chinese Grand Prix and the Italian Grand Prix. You look at Lando Norris, started the season off with a win. 3 more podium finish, didn't podium Saudi Arabia, didn't podium Canada, didn't podium in the Netherlands, the Dutch Grand Prix. All the other races, up until today, podium finish or a win. That is an astonishing accomplishment by this McLaren team to have their drivers that dominant. Max Verstappen, the only wins he had, Japan, Imola, then Italy, now Azerbaijan today. He is starting to put something together, Max Verstappen. That Red Bull team is starting to put something together. It should be too little too late. It should be Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris are still going to go out there, get podium finishes. They're still going to go out there, qualify well. Qualifying didn't go exactly well. Oscar Piastri, of course, crashed in qualifying. Lando Norris just did not seem to get a good lap. You look at the results, 7th place and a retirement. That's not going to cut it when you got Max Verstappen and potentially a recharged Red Bull team coming up. I cannot think of any other former motorsport where we've seen a team so dominant like this and then fail to seal the deal. I know NASCAR is different because of their playoffs. Some people will talk about Kevin Harvick, 9 wins, no championship. This is something where this team has clearly been on such another level, but their internal mistakes from the papaya rules of we got to treat the drivers fair are raising questions. I mean, you got to look at what the drivers did this weekend. Again, it seems to be falling under pressure. The pit crew for Lando Norris not getting the job done. Needed a good pit stop, slow pit stop, lost plenty of positions. I think without a doubt, this would be the biggest collapse in motorsports, especially we're talking about the pinnacle of motorsports, Formula One. I know some people will say different examples, but I keep happening to think that in the case of even Kevin Harvick, 9 wins, still 26 races, 9 wins. While that's a lot, this is not on the level of Formula One, where we're, I believe, 17 races in. You look at the wins Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri have and the podiums they have. If they just go back to that again for the next 4 races, then I think it's going to be game over. They should get the constructors easily. If they don't get the drivers, that would be a huge black eye to their 2025 season.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. I definitely have to agree with you. I think this would be the biggest collapse in the history of motorsports, at least in recent memory. Yeah, I think it'd be hard, to give a definite answer to this question. I'd have to go back to the history of all the major disciplines and look where certain drivers were at various points of the championship and see like what happened at the end of that championship, which caused them, to either win the championship or collapse. But like you said, it should win the constructors, locked it up pretty easily. But as far as the drivers' championship, it should still, be ball in their court. They should be able to get this. But if for some reason they don't, Joe, I have to admit it, I think it would have to be a fireable offense for someone in McLaren if they end up losing this drivers' championship, because there's no way on earth, given how dominant of a car they've had this season and how great their drivers have performed overall, there's no way they should lose this drivers' championship. And if they do, like, this will be, a major egg on your face moment. Is extremely humiliating if they somehow let Max Verstappen get back into this. And if Max does get back in the championship an inch closer, it would make some really good TV and a lot of, more intriguing storylines coming out of Formula One. And it would make it a lot more interesting than it currently is to see if Max can get them. And the big thing is, like, are we going to see this Red Bull hot streak continue, or are they going to cool off again? And we're going to see the McLarens, rise back to the top of the occasion. And, once we get to Singapore, we'll start to get some answers. And as we get into this back half of the season, because we still have a lot of racing coming up, with Singapore. Then we got 2 races in the U.S., got COTA, Las Vegas, also got Mexico City, Brazil, Qatar, Abu Dhabi. There's still a whole lot of racing to go here in this Formula One season. And we'll close out our F1 segment. Let's bring Tanner back on to talk about today's Michelin Endurance Cup race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Indeed. Thank you, Kobe. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course was the site of the penultimate race of the 2025 IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship season and, as Kobe mentioned, the Michelin Endurance Cup. 6 hours of racing in the TireRack.com battle on the bricks ended with a 2-lap shootout after a late race caution for a pair of LMP2s puzzlingly colliding. The GTP front runners were low on hybrid energy, but this caution allowed 2 Cadillacs and an Acura to battle for the win. For the first time in over 2 years, Action Express Racing's number 31 Wheel and Engineering Cadillac are winners again in IMSA competition, with Jack Aitken crossing the yard of bricks to take the checkered flag alongside co-drivers Earl Bamber and Frederick Vesti. With Action Express scoring its first win since the 2023 12 Hours of Sebring and Cadillac's first IMSA win of the 2025 season, Kobe, is this a huge sigh of relief for them?
Absolutely. Obviously it's a huge sigh of relief for Cadillac, but it's an even more a huge sigh of relief for Action Express Racing, because for a long time they've been, one of the gold standards of IMSA's top category, from their times of racing in the Daytona prototype category and then it went to the DPI and all of that, and now to GTP. You think of Action Express to be the ultimate team to beat in this series, because in order to achieve the greatest areas to get in IMSA, you have to go through Action Express usually. But for the last few years, they've shown speed, and yes, they've been in the fight, but they just haven't been able to put a complete race together and get a job done. As I believe we flash on the screen the results of today's race. It was just I just couldn't put my finger on it, Tanner, about Action Express the last few years, because for a pickle winner, I picked them several times over the last few years, but they never seemed to bring home a victory and get me a point. And I was wondering if it was the driver lineup that they have, not really clicking anymore, or was it the fact that they've had team personnel, depart over the years, and you didn't have the same engineers and all of that who were working so extremely hard and getting the best out of these cars. Just couldn't put my finger on it, but today, I think Action Express finally got that one race where they had the speed. They had good BOP with the Cadillacs over the other GTP manufacturers, and then they fully executed until the very end. And I think that's something that team can be extremely happy about. With Jack Aitken, Earl Bamber, and Frederick Vesti, thought they all did a really good job during their stints today. And we'll see if Action Express can close out with some positive momentum in the season finale in a few weeks at Motul, Petit Le Mans, and Cadillac as well, getting their first win. It's hard to believe, that Cadillac this late in the season, that this is their first win in IMSA this year. I know it's been a year, dominated by Porsche the first half. Then we've also seen, Acura and BMW find success as well. And then there's Cadillac, because General Motors in the top class, like Action Express, they've been the gold standards of this category, and we just haven't seen a lot of success for them lately. And I think both sides, General Motors and Action Express, have a lot to be happy about it. And plus, winning at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, whether you're on the oval or the road course, always an extremely special moment. As I saw drivers on the IMSA social media pages kissing the bricks.
Indeed, and it was a welcome sight for IMSA and Action Express Racing to come across the line first. Obviously, Jim France, owner of both entities. Obviously today, I think penalties kind of became the name of the game in the battle at the bricks. Since Road America, we talked here at Grid Network about IMSA deciding to be a bit more aggressive with assessing penalties for on-track incidents. Road America was crazy and chaotic. Drivers really not showing any respect with one another. Lots of contact and pushing drivers off of the racing surface. At VIR, IMSA Race Control started making calls, and we praise them for stepping up to clean up overly aggressive driving tactics. But it seemed today at Indianapolis, they made lots of drive-through penalty calls for blocking and avoidable contact that really changed the race for many teams and drivers in the field. So, Kobe, do you think IMSA went overboard today with the excessive number of penalties they assessed?
I said, well, when you look at this situation, I think what everybody wants to see is number one, consistency, and number two, balance. Like, like you don't want to see like every single little incident be called today. And I hate to say it, Tanner, but I think that's exactly what happened today. I think that they kind of, went a little bit too far with all of the penalties. Some of the things they called, I think, absolutely justifiable. Like you run someone off into the track, when they clearly had the corner, by all means, call them a drive-through penalty. But some of the but I remember, I forgot who it was, but two of the cars touched. It was like very light contact that went off in the grass, like it wasn't anything egregious, but that was a drive-through penalty. And also saw another block that wasn't an overly egregious block, and that was called as a penalty. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I know this is something you might expect, I guess in the Formula One style endurance racing that you see with the ACO in their series, like the European Le Mans Series, Asian Le Mans Series, the FA World Endurance Championship. Like what we saw today, this is what I would expect from them and all of that. And, that's not taking a shot at the ACO sanctioned championships. I think they're a great sports car racing series over there overseas. But even I don't think the ACO would make some of the calls that were made today. And I know IMSA said they were going to be cracking down, on this aggressive driving. I think what we saw at Road America, I didn't think they were aggressive enough in making calls, and that's why we saw, a whole bunch of ridiculousness during that race. And then that VIR, I thought they did a pretty good job for the most part, making calls that were necessary and showing the drivers that we're not going to put up, with this type of misconduct on the racetrack. And then today, I felt like they were Oprah, the Oprah meme where like you get one, you get one, you get one. I felt like they were just handing out a whole bunch of penalties. Some of them were absolutely justified, but I feel like other ones, they could have just let it go. Like I was saying, the ACO would be more, stricter in terms of on-track conduct and stuff like that, because, over there, they race a lot more cleaner and more with respect. But, the American style racing is different. I think IMSA wanted, wants its series to be more aggressive and all of that. I think that was the vision, that unlike racing the World Endurance Championship where you touch someone, you're probably going to get in trouble, where in IMSA you can trade a little paint and then you're not really going to get in trouble. But I think that we've been going a little bit further than what the ACO has done in its series with the calls that were made today. And I just feel like that we just need to try to find the right balance. At Road America, they weren't harsh enough. VIR, I thought that was an okay balance, but today I think the balance went on the other side with over officiating. And I was looking at the list of penalties before we come on the air, Tanner, and if I read to you all the penalties that were called for, avoidable contact and blocking, it would be a scroll going out of the door of my bedroom here. Like it was just a whole bunch of calls, and like you said, it changed the race for so many teams. And I don't think people want to see over officiating here. We just want to see balance and consistency.
A CVS receipt full of penalties on the penalty report today from Indianapolis out of IMSA. It's unfortunate, and you hope that those kinds of calls won't affect the racing product here in a few weeks at the Petit Le Mans. Taking a look at some of the other class winners from today's race, the number 11 TDS Racing prototype of Mikkel Jensen, Hunter McElrea, and Stephen Thomas survived a chaotic class race with lots of contact to win LMP2. In GTD Pro, the number 64 Multimatic Motorsports Ford Mustang of Seb Prio and Mike Rockefeller held off the number 81 Dragon Speed Ferrari to take class honors. The driver who finished the race in that number 81 Ferrari, Albert Costa, leaves Indianapolis 18 points behind GTD Pro Championship leaders Antonio Garcia and Alexander Sims from Corvette Racing by Pratt Miller Motorsports. Whoever finishes ahead of the other at Road Atlanta will be the GTD Pro champion. In GTD, the number 70 Inception Racing Ferrari got its very first IMSA victory with Frederick Schandorf, Ollie Milroy, and Brendan Uribe. Saturday, October 11th, will be the 2025 IMSA season finale with the 10-hour endurance race Motul Petit Le Mans at Michelin Raceway Road, Atlanta. Joe, with all that said and in the books, what do you got for us about the grid ranking?
Plenty with the grid ranking, not as much as the Grid Endurance Performance Index, which of course Wednesday will be updated, especially following IMSA. Taking a look at the top 10, Alex Palou, of course, clinched the championship, so really the bout is for second place and behind. But no major changes inside the top 10. Piastri and Norris both lost points this race weekend, and Norris actually slid down one position behind Elfyn Evans. outside the top 10, this is where you saw Max Verstappen moved up to 11th place. Remember, he was as low as 20th earlier this year. So this is really evident of some of the progress he has made in the last 3 races. Ryan Blaney has gone from 19th up to 13th with his big win. Of course, Marc Marquez in second place. This next race for him in Japan, he's going to be the first opportunity for him to claim the MotoGP World Riders Championship. Only 15 are left in contention for second place in the grid ranking. 3 Formula One drivers, 6 NASCAR drivers, 3 Supercar drivers, 3 World Rally Championship drivers, and Alex Marquez from MotoGP. Next race weekend, NASCAR is at Kansas, MotoGP at Motegi. Meanwhile, Grid Endurance Performance Index, as I mentioned, very competitive. Over 6 lead changes, another new leader, full update on Wednesday's Grid Tonight to recap. And of course, this Wednesday, we're going to reveal the next week's Grid Endurance Performance Index. Be sure to check it out with the hashtag Grid Endurance.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. And it was also, I want to give a quick shout out to Lawrence Van Thor for checking out our grid ranking. I believe he's not a grid ranking, a grid endurance performance index. I believe he's the first professional race car driver to ask questions about like what it is, because I guess he saw that he was leading that this past week, and Matt White gave him a good explanation on what it was about on social media, and hopefully Lawrence will, continue to follow it throughout the rest of the season. If he continues to perform well in his sports car racing events throughout the remainder of the year, he might end up seeing it again as him potentially been this year's Grid Endurance Performance Index world champion. And with that said, it's time for our Grid One shining moment from this racing weekend. If you're watching here live on replay, let us know down in the chat what's the one thing that stood out to you the most from the racing we had this weekend, whether it was the IMSA 6-hour endurance race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Formula One's Azerbaijan Grand Prix, or the NASCAR Cup Series round of 12 opener in the playoffs at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. So Tanner, I'll start off with you. What's your one shining moment?
Well, I could go on about my pick a winner pick from yesterday, Ryan Blaney coming into this weekend and mopping up the competition in the Libman Menards Ford. I'm actually going to go with yesterday's Truck Series winner, Corey Heim. Corey yesterday tied the all-time series record for wins in a season in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, winning his 9th race, which tied Greg Biffle's 1999 total. And something important to remember about that 1999 campaign for Biffle is that I don't believe he won that title. So keep that in mind going into Phoenix here in the next couple months with Heim. But you really can't say enough about the 2311 development prospect. He has done nothing short of validate everything that anyone's ever said about him in terms of good things. Obviously, the 9 wins in itself is a pretty startling total, but it really could be somewhere in the realm of 14 to 15 of the events that he's run this year, where he's certainly had a strong enough truck to win, just not strong enough circumstances or luck. I think that it's really a shame at this point that someone like Corey Heim, with the amount of talent that he has and has exhibited to all of us, that he's going to be stuck potentially in the development pipeline another year. But at the same time, he is clearly head and shoulders above anybody in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, and I think that he deserves a little bit more flowers for the historical run that he has put on this season.
That's a great shiny moment. My shiny moment is going to come from Formula One, Yuki Tsunoda. I know not exactly the finish he had wanted. He would have loved to have a podium, potentially a much stronger finish. But considering where he was at the start of the season with Racing Bulls, gets promoted to Red Bulls. Then all the people talking about he doesn't belong in the team. He's not performing. He's letting down the team. Red Bull goes through a change, and the number of points finishes he has is coming up. It could be circumstance. It could be, of course, Baku, a crazy unpredictable race. could be just maybe a good few races for him. But I think it has to build some confidence for him to know where he was at the beginning of the season, midway through the season, and now. With his new team leadership, I think it's helping him out. If he could keep getting point finishes and showing improvement, if they can make that car better for him, there's going to be potential. So Yuki Tsunoda, that's my shiny moment. And also second shiny moment, a quick congratulations to our friend Joshua Birch, 10,000 subscribers. That was hit during his watch along at New Hampshire. Congratulations to you, buddy.
Yeah, definitely. Huge congratulations to Josh. We know the hard work that him and his great team over there at JB Motorsports do every single race weekend. That they be doing, such amazing work, like work that a lot of people would not even want to do. They cover every practice session, every qualifying, and every race, that you can really think of, from stock cars to open wheels and sports cars. They really do it all over there at JB Motorsports. So huge congratulations to Joshua Birch and his wonderful team of people. And my shining moment, I got to give it to Josh Berry, for finally getting a good result after what's been, a disastrous, opening round of the playoffs for him. 3 consecutive last place finishes in the round of 16 and been eliminated from the playoffs. That's certainly something that, a lot of us didn't expect to see from Josh Berry. Maybe people didn't predict him to advance out of the round of 16, but nobody, saw him having, the absolute worst luck in the world, crashing out on, lap 1 at Darlington and then Gateway, hard in the wall, and then, the fire at Bristol, just not good luck at all. And to see him, in the fight with Ryan Blaney there at the win, for the win, and having a chance to go out there and take the checker flag, I think that's something that number 21 Wood Brothers team have to be really excited about, and also a huge confidence booster for Josh Berry, because we know, in this sport, 1 week you're a hero, the next week you're zero, and Josh Berry, he's been zero for several weeks now, so to finally go out there, and be a hero and be in contention to win, something that's really good. And although he didn't win, it has to feel like a win for the entire team, especially what it's been like for the last few weeks.
Josh Berry, a great shining moment. Great to see the Wood Brothers always running well. That said, we are all out of time. Monday Grid Encore, Ben and Brandon, lot to cover, including the thrilling finish at New Hampshire with the Modified Series race. Plenty to talk about with that. Ben was actually at the track. Wednesday Grid tonight, Kobe and the rest of the team of Joshua Birch, Matt White. Latest motorsports news. I think we already got a couple ideas of the next headlines, and of course, the Grid Endurance Performance Index updated. Then, NASCAR pre-race later in the week. Kansas Speedway will be on the air, and we'll wrap it up. Do this all over again for NASCAR and MotoGP. Will we have another champion crowned this year? Encourage everyone to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our programs right here on Grid Network TV. And a big thank you to our Patreon investors calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in us throughout 2025. For Tanner and Kobe, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and have a wonderful evening.